Last week, I added cel shading to the X-Men 97 Wolverine figure, and it turned out way better than I anticipated. It's like watching the animated cartoon Wolverine come to life. Check it out if you're interested. I pointed out that the figure looks like it had an extra row of abs, and many of you have informed me that I can push the belt up. The good thing is that the belt is quite snug, so it's not gonna slide back down anytime soon. The not so good thing is that I had to mix the paint again to paint over the area under the belt. Luckily, the color matched, but it did take quite a few layers to make the painted and unpainted areas blend together seamlessly. But thank you, you guys are awesome. Now my Wolverine is perfect. On to the next X-Men. I've decided to do Storm next because Storm is one of my favorites. I actually got this retro VHS Storm a while ago. I love the packaging. My original plan was to keep it as a sealed collectible figure, but after successfully doing Wolverine last week, I feel like I should give this a go. Let's deconstruct this figure. There's an FAQ on the paint and brushes I use in the description box below. My initial thought is that this figure looks better in person than the promotional images. The cel shading they did reminds me a lot of Venom and Symbiote Spider-Man, but to Hasbro's credit, I think they did a pretty decent job capturing Storm's look in the cartoon. That said, maybe because the figure is predominantly white, it does have a bit of that cheap look to it, especially when looking at the figure from this side. The figure looks quite bland. So my goal today is to use what's already on the figure and enhance it even more so she looks more like her cartoon self. So... Hello, this is Ken. I like making things. Whether it's repainting my figures or making diorama displays, I love making things look awesome. My goal is to elevate my figures so they can shine on my display. Join my DIY venture as I ask myself the same question every week. Can I make it? Before I begin, I'm going to take her cape off. 1. To prevent myself from accidentally painting over it, and 2. I'm going to iron out the wrinkles. Luckily, the cape isn't that difficult to remove. I just have to remove the hands and the shoulder pads, then they'll come right off. Okay, let's paint. When I look at the reference images, the first thing that I notice is that her suit is actually not pure white. It's more of an icy white. So I'm going to mix myself a light pale blue color. I have to be careful though, because I want this blue to be very faint. It should still look whitish in the end. Some of the black lines got paint over them, so let's redefine them. The thing about cel shading is that the colors need to be very flat and opaque, and the edges need to be crisp. With live action figures, I can sometimes get away with imperfections because they look natural. But here, I can't. Everything needs to be clean and at full opacity. Gotta make sure my hands are as steady as possible. I do that by bracing my elbows against my body, and using my pinky as an anchor point to keep my hands stable. I'm trying my best not to make any mistakes. I do not recommend cleaning up mistakes with water or a wet brush. Not for cel shading. Not that it doesn't work, it's just that the water may make things worse and spread the pigment, resulting in muddy colors on the surface. Instead, it's better to draw the overall shapes first, and then work on the edges to get them as sharp as possible. With Storm, she kinda has this tracksuit look, where there are these black lines going down her arms and legs. I don't want the lines to be too straight, otherwise they'll look odd. I want them to have this curvy tapered shape to them, so they look a bit more organic and also go with what's already on the figure. Alright, on to the shading color. Let me mix a color that's a shade or two darker. I'm gonna apply this shading color to this side of her body. Pause. This color is not working. It's too vibrant. Let me see if I can desaturate the color by mixing a bit of light gray into it. Please work, please work, please work. Oh, okay. This color is much more muted. Nice. Let's go over the painted areas first. I'm gonna need a couple of coats to fully cover up the blue, but I'll do that in a bit. Let me figure out the cel shading on the rest of the body first. When I look at reference images, I notice that the cel shading isn't super consistent. I'm aiming for something not too basic, but not too complicated as well. This one here seems to be a good middle ground. Another thing that I noticed is that sometimes the cel shading goes over the black lines on Storm. It doesn't happen all the time, but I find that whenever it does, the character looks more defined, more three-dimensional but in a cartoon way. So I'm gonna do that too, because the figure still looks pretty basic to me. Adding the darker color around the black stripes should help. Oh, by the way, I got the X-Men 97 Storm too. I originally was gonna work on the new one only, but I love OG Storm, and I figured if I were to do both, it would be more convenient if I can get the cel shading to work on the VHS one first, and then apply the same techniques onto the new Storm, rather than the other way around. I'm gonna outline the yellow strap off camera. Be right back. I'm back. Look at that. That looks so 2D. I also added a few black stripes on the left side of her legs to give that side a bit more details as well. I didn't do much to the back. Her cape should cover most of it. Now let me seal everything with a matte spray. Onto Storm's face. I don't want to do this, but I need to test this out. I need to know if it's worth it to outline her hair. I would much rather not do it if I don't have to, but I feel like her white hair would pop so much more if it's outlined. But it's so hard to reach all those tiny crevices and make clean lines. Okay, that took a long time, but I did it. The lines look a bit Sharpie done though. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. It may look better once I add the shading color. I like the color they used at the bottom of her hair, but you can barely notice it when the head is on the figure. I'm gonna emphasize the shading color on the right side of her hair. Okay, never mind. I ended up adding it all over. It just looks more three-dimensional, you know? Now onto the face. Let me dust a thin coat of brown to get rid of that shine. Something I noticed in the cartoon is that Storm has really thin eyebrows, so I'm gonna make mine thinner as well. Okay, onto the cel shading. I'm adding it to the right side of her face. The only thing left are her lips. In the cartoon, they are less bright red and more of a dark velvet red, so let me darken them a smidge. Alright, I'm done. The hair kinda looks crazy here, but I think it's because it's disconnected from the body. It should look better once I pop it back on, so let's see. Ooh, the icy blue looks really good. It looks so much richer than the plain white. It also matches the color of her cape much better. Oh, speaking of, the cape also looks much smoother with all those wrinkles ironed out. But the best thing is that the cel shading is so much more believable now. She looks like a cutout from the cartoon. What do you think? Do you like what I've done? Let me know down below. I am very happy with how Storm turned out, but I don't know if I'm gonna paint the new Storm right away. As cool as this looks, cel shading is still pretty tough to do. With live action figures, I can usually tell whether or not the paint looks good during the process. But with cel shading, I feel like I won't know until near the end. I kinda have to think 2 steps ahead. Once I'm done with the color on an area, I have to move on. The reason is because I may not be able to mix the exact same shade again. So if I do patch something, I have to paint over the entire limb or the entire figure just to keep the colors consistent. With all that said, should I do a video on the new Storm? I'm very happy with this one, so likely just do the exact same thing to the other one. But back to OG Storm. Let's take some photos. Oh my. This looks like a drawing right out of the 90s cartoon. Why does she look so good? Okay, this side isn't as impressive, but those new lines definitely helped. The only issue I have is that she's very top heavy, due to how big her hair is. And her legs being made out of this softer rubbery plastic also doesn't help. Maybe that's why they updated Storm's hairstyle, so she can turn her head and not topple over. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Cel shading isn't my favorite thing to do, but it seems like many of you enjoy content like this. Give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll need all the support I can get to go through the X-Men wave. And until then, stay inspired and I'll see you next week. I can make it, so can you.